All right. So for those of you joining us, this should be pretty short and sweet. We are going to be allowing plenty of time for questions at the end. Hopefully some of your questions will be answered with the presentation, but the whole point and like really the meat of this is for you to ask any questions that have arisen based on your review of the RFAs. Again, this is the CERA program's Housing Stability Services portion of a Q&A session. We did launch 2 separate RFAs related to the same CERA program, one of which is Case Review and Administration. That Q&A was yesterday. That recording will be posted on our website in the same spot where you found the original RFA documents. And then this one will be as well. So for any folks that were unable to attend, they will be able to find this presentation there as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Any questions that come up during the presentation, please put those in the chat, and my team, Carly and Haley, will be tracking those, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. Thank you. All right. So the CERA program, what was formerly, this came up yesterday, formerly known as CRISP. That was our plan, but unfortunately a different state agency was already using that acronym, and so we had to pivot, and now we are CERA. So the Colorado Emergency Rental Assistance Program is funded by Proposition 123 in part. The rest of that funding did go over to CHAFA, to our friends there for affordable housing. So Colorado Revised Statute 2932-101 is where you can find all of the detailed language as to what the actual bill entails, what it allows for, and the different components. Rental assistance and homelessness prevention is only one of the components that are funded through Proposition 123. Excuse me. So this particular funding is intended to provide housing stability services, and it will be to a tune of about $2 to $3 million per year. This funding, as well as that which is allocated to case review and administration, does fluctuate year by year. So it will not be an exact number, but it is anticipated that for case review and administration, it will be between 15 and 30 million. And then for housing stability services, between 2 to 3 million per year. In terms of timeline related to this RFA and program launch, we launched the RFA on October 1st. It will close on Halloween, 10/31. RFA determinations will ensue after that. Everyone will be notified as to the state's determination by December 2nd. And then grant agreements will be sent to selected grantees for review and signature. Any negotiations that need to happen there or adjustments will happen during that time period. And then about beginning of January, beginning of 2025, we will begin any training that's necessary for new grantees, communications to the public about the availability of funds, and contract execution and program launch is planned for February 3rd. So that is a Monday. In terms of the grantee selection process, this is outlined on pages 9 through 11 of the Housing Stability Services RFA document. You can find all the different criteria that we will be looking at and different factors that we will be taking into account when determining who to select for this funding. But we have received some questions that we wanted to provide some clarity on. So in terms of agency expectations and capacity, so the agency expectations in terms of, how many people are served or how much money is expended per month, that kind of thing, it's so dependent on the number of households who are actually seeking housing stability services and the number of agencies that respond to this RFA. So for example, if we were to receive 4 applications and all are from smaller rural agencies, that's great, but we will have to adjust how and who we serve based on that RFA result or response. If we get a couple of statewide agencies that are able to serve statewide, and then some smaller rural agencies who are able to demonstrate the need for their particular area to be served by a local agency, then that's great. That's fantastic. I mean, we understand the need that is specific to rural communities, and that cannot always be met by a larger statewide agency. The narrative portion of the RFA is the opportunity for any agencies to make their case as to why they are the best ones for the job, essentially. So if you are a smaller rural agency or you have a targeted population that you serve, please make sure to highlight that in the RFA narrative and make that determination. Happy to answer any questions as to what we are looking for. But again, pages 9 to 11 of the RFA details what we will be looking for. The grading scale is also integrated. And so please take a look at that. But we are always available for questions, and my contact information will be at the end of this presentation. In terms of the scope of work for Housing Stability Services, the large things that we will be looking at are application assistance, case management and referrals, housing navigation, and then other duties. So something that comes up with Housing Stability Services and for those agencies is, for example, the need for the hand delivery of checks. Sometimes checks need to be hand delivered to a landlord in order to stop the eviction and have that happen. The hope is that Housing Stability Services agencies will be either able to do that themselves or will be able to partner with more localized agencies who would then be able to provide a similar service. So in terms of application assistance, there is a pre-application and a full application component of the case review portion. That is how folks will be identified. It's not necessarily folks who have already applied, but folks who might be having trouble applying for either the pre-application or the full application. Anyone who comes in and maybe does not qualify for this assistance due to having received similar assistance recently, or who maybe needs more than what we're able to provide, those folks can be referred to different case management solutions, different agencies that might have different resources, etc. Housing navigation, some folks might be better suited for relocation services. They might either need a place to live, and since they don't have an active lease, do not qualify for case assistance or for rental assistance through this program, but maybe this agency can help them find a spot, help them apply for apartments, things like that. Any type of like landlord coordination or mediation, maybe this person can afford to pay their arrears, but they need help setting up a payment plan that works for both the landlord and for them and their budget. Or eviction diversion, that can also be a large component of HSS. In terms of the applicant selection process, so those seeking services will be identified either by the call center that we will have established. This is a DOH funded call center, and folks can contact that call center from anywhere in the state and will be provided with referral for HSS services if appropriate. The other way that folks can be referred are any that are selected through the random selection process for case review can also then need HSS services. Those folks will be placed on a DOH administered wait list, and grantees will be able to pull names of those seeking housing stability services from there. In terms of what we will be tracking, so HSS services provided by our selected grantees will be asked to track these different items. So an example of the tracker, I'm sure you cannot read it, but what it says is what's written on the document. But this is the tracker that we will be using to determine what different services folks are seeking, what agencies are providing to folks, and some demographic information so that we have information about those that are most in need of these services. So the information collected will then populate this tracker that we have. So it will track the county of residence. So who is seeking who is seeking assistance and where are they located. That way we can determine, if there's a higher need in certain counties. It's very likely that Denver County will be high up on that list, just given the nature of how many people live in Denver County, the fact that it's extremely expensive, similar to other counties in the area, et cetera, et cetera. So total households assisted, we will be able to track that as well. Households served based by AMI. AMI is not a deterrent from folks being able to receive this service, but it is good to track so that we can show whether there's a particular AMI bucket that folks fall into that are needing the most services. And then the months served, just so that we know if there's fluctuations of certain months, there are more folks needing assistance versus less. I am the DOH point of contact. So my name is Maria Stein. I'm the Emergency Rental Assistance Program Manager. That is my email. You are welcome to reach out to me for any and all questions. My contact information is also listed on the RFA. So if for whatever reason you misplaced this, you should be able to locate it on the documents that you will be filling out. And we are open for questions. So Carly and Haley, did any questions come in through the chat that I can answer?
Yeah, we got one question from Audrey. Since households can receive up to 7 months of assistance, will agencies be expected to provide ongoing case management for the duration of assistance?
No. So depending on what the folks need, it's not case management as you would see in maybe some other funding sources or attached to other funding sources. I think that it's more in that moment as it relates to their current period of housing instability. What can we provide to maybe prevent them from landing in this spot in the future? What can we change? Is their current place where they're living just not sustainable for their budget? Can we pursue case management when it comes to relocation and getting them set up in a different place? So that could take a couple days, it could take a month. But no, we are not expecting there to be a sustainable and ongoing case management service that is associated with these funds.
Maria, our next question is about the call center function. So Brothers asked, will there be an RFA for the call center function, and how is this contractor being selected?
There will not be an RFA for the call center function. That being said, this money can fund smaller, diverse, different call centers than what is already established. So we have a DOH established call center already that we will be utilizing for this program. And so that is why it is not included in the RFA. That being said, that does not preclude other agencies from proposing the use of their call center or a different already established call center that can utilize these funds to provide additional service or more nuanced service to Colorado.
Maria, our next question is from Hannah. In the application, do you want us to estimate how many households we can serve through each of the scope items?
No, not necessarily. I think that if you want to break it down in that manner, and that would be easiest for your organization in terms of being able to determine that estimate, that's completely fine. You can break it down in the budget, but it's not necessary. I think that we know that there's going to be a variety. We know that there's going to be folks that receive every single available HSS service. And then there's going to be other folks that come in with one need and one need only, and that's going to be it. So feel free to break it down as makes best sense within the parameters that are set within that budget template.
So our next question is a budget question. Michelle asked, does outreach to program participants count as a billable hour for HSS? And then is there anything that wouldn't count as a billable hour?
Michelle, when you say outreach, would you mind elaborating on what you mean by outreach and what you are defining as program participants?
Yeah, so I'm envisioning we get the list off of the wait list for who we would go look for. And let's say we try to reach somebody from that wait list, but we can't get a hold of them. So they never end up actually making it and receiving the service.
Yes, that would absolutely be acceptable, particularly if they're already on the wait list. These are folks that have already been identified as wanting or needing housing stability services. And so your agency attempting to follow up and reach out to them would absolutely constitute billable time for housing stability services. That being said, I mean, that's something that's a little bit hard to track because it'll probably come down to like minutes. And within reason, like please feel free, you know, if you set aside an hour each day or a couple hours each day or each week that are set aside for outreaching the folks that have been assigned to you or that you've assigned to yourself, then by all means that is billable time for housing stability services. In terms of what would not count as a billable hour, I don't know that we have like defined things that don't count outside of if you are also a case review and administration agency, you cannot bill for both housing stability services and case review and administration for the same hours for the same person. So you just need to be careful. For those smaller agencies, it's very possible that the same person will be providing case review and also be the ones assigned to follow up on the case management side, that kind of thing. So it just needs to be very clear that you cannot double bill for housing stability services and case review at the same time.
Maria, Michelle also put a second budget question in the chat. What costs under other would be considered allowable for the grant? Thinking about indirect or admin costs, office supplies, office space, supervisory time for overseeing housing navigator staff, etc.
So what is billable here is for actual service provided to these individuals or households seeking housing stability services. What is done with that money once it is received back to you all, once it's reimbursed, is up to you. But in terms of what you can bill for, it is exclusively for the service provided to the household seeking assistance. And I actually see the next question. Is there any expectation that programs also record data in HMIS? There is no HMIS component to this grant. But feel free to track away. Any other questions that I can answer? Anything that has come up in conversation? Anything stemming from the presentation or outside of that?
There's a couple more, Maria.
Oh, fantastic. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, you're fine. Audrey asked, what is the interface between organizations performing this HSS work and those doing the case review and administration?
It's possible I may have alluded to this. So Audrey, please let me know if what I said did not answer aspects of your question. But generally, tenants that are seeking assistance, again, will either be identified through call center or through this, through those process and thus populate the wait list. And so in terms of how those agencies will work together, there are some agencies that might apply for both RFAs and might receive both. If so, then those folks would be able to serve, they would be able to assign folks to themselves from that wait list, but everyone will be working off of that wait list. The other thing that can happen is that folks might come directly to your agency, and then you will be able to assign, like place those on the wait list so that we can track and on your tracker and assign them to your own agency as they came into you. If you are a statewide organization and you are hoping to, let's say that you have someone come in through, you have someone come in who is in Denver County, and, or maybe not Denver County, that's a bad, but let's say in a smaller, more rural area, and that rural area, you know, there is an HSS agency that is local. You can ask that agency whether they would be willing and able to take that person on so that they can receive more targeted service.
Maria, the next question we have is, will there be a central site for all of this information like Neighborly, or will each agency be responsible for setting up a portal? Will there be any correlation between the site and HMIS, which we did answer?
Sure. So there will not be any correlation between the site and HMIS. In terms of tracking, we will be using trackers individual to each agency. So it's something as simple as a Google Sheet is what we've proposed right now. And so that will be populated by each agency, and then we will take that information and have a master list of everything for each agency so that we are able to track the program as a whole. That will be the way that that's tracked. However, if those folks are also receiving case review and administration services, rental assistance, then those will be tracked in Neighborly. So we will be able to see the folks in Neighborly who have received both services, and then HSS will be separated out. I should also specify that Neighborly will also show if someone was referred for HSS services. So you'll be able to see anyone who is receiving both in Neighborly. It's just the folks that are only receiving HSS services and not rental assistance that will be tracked separately in that other sheet and not in Neighborly.
So Denise has a question. They say our program focuses on asylum seekers. We provide housing and case management for 7 months. Will this limitation on potential clients fall within the boundaries of the funding?
Denise, do you mind elaborating a little bit? I'm not sure that I understand the question.
Hi. Our program has been around for several years, and our clients are in the asylum process, and that is one of the requirements to be our client. So we don't just take people because they need, we have that requirement for our program.
Got it. Okay. So you would be able to serve a very targeted population.
Right.
That is fine. Again, I would highlight the need for your particular agency and the reason why you can only serve that particular population. In a similar way that an agency that can only serve a particular county should make the case for why they should be serving just that county and why it's necessary for it to be, in that case, a local agency. In your case, for it to be, for you to receive this funding and only provide service to asylum seekers. If you make that argument in the narrative, then that will all be taken into consideration.
Great. Thank you so much.
Maria, the next question is from Brothers. You spoke to this briefly, but I want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. Could other costs include technology, software, marketing?
You are welcome to include whatever you feel is essential for your organization in that budget, by all means. We don't require that you break it out in that way, but I do think that if, for example, let's say that you have a call center component to the HSS services that you are able to provide, then you could absolutely include that cost in what you would be requesting via Housing Stability Services funding.
Had a couple more come in. So Hannah asked, just to clarify, in the RFA, there is a requirement to have navigators within 50 miles of most households. Did you say that we can lean on our statewide partners to meet this requirement?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for statewide agencies, you don't necessarily have to be located within 50 miles of most households. I don't think there's a single agency in the state that meets that requirement. But the hope is that you would have the ability to maybe partner with a local agency there or reach out to a local agency closer to where that household is and then provide that service. That being said, that is how it would work for the statewide agencies. If you are a rural agency and you're going to be serving that rural population, then your clients will already be within 50 miles of your organization. So that's kind of like the difference between the statewide organizations and the more rural locations.
Maria, next question. Can you provide an example of eviction diversion services allowed under HSS?
It's a bit of a catch-all. So thank you for asking. It is, things that come to mind with eviction diversion is there a reason why this person is experiencing housing instability in their current place? Is it a place that they can afford to live going forward and that is a good fit for them, but they're just having problems with the landlord? Let's say that, they have someone staying in their household who is not on the lease, but is going to be living there moving forward. Can your agency talk to the landlord and go about adding this person to the lease, or speaking with the landlord about like what it is, like, is this person causing a problem, or can they be added to the lease? And then that'll solve the issue. Are we able to pursue relocation for someone who can't afford to live where they are? They're gonna, like, the way that would be eviction diversion is even if this person did receive housing stability services or rental assistance, is this going to be an unsustainable place to live moving forward? And they're just going to end up in this boat in a couple of months once the rental assistance we provide runs out. If so, then perhaps the way of pursuing eviction diversion would be to try and relocate them, maybe negotiating with the landlord about breaking the lease if that's something that's necessary, or anything in that manner.
This next question has a couple of questions in one, and you kind of just answered part of it. Caitlin said, we found housing navigation can sometimes require landlord incentives to be successful. And then asked, is that an appropriate use of funds? Then asked, what about relocation costs, like first month's rent and deposit?
So that would be an appropriate use of case review and administration funds, but would not be an eligible expense under housing stability services. Any other questions? I believe that is all that I see in the chat. Anybody who has other questions, feel free to come off mute. Raise your hand, ask your questions, whatever. This time is yours.
Maria, I had a question from yesterday's webinar that I thought of after the call. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Do you mind if we hold case review and administration questions until the end, just to make sure that those that are only interested in the HSS portion are able to hop off if they're not interested in that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Lauren Bernstein. Hi, Maria.
Lauren.
To Caitlin's question, I think it's a really good question, because I think, right, like I've seen, right, a lot of success if somebody maybe has not, like, we've offered like cleanings to help, right? Maria, I'm talking to you like you didn't work in this world.
You're good.
So I think like that can be a huge incentive. And I've had landlords like change on a dime with like giving them like some sort of cleaning, for example. So if it's more of a case review, are we going to be able to match up with that? And how does that look knowing like we're probably going to have to support each other for more than just a referral.
Absolutely. So I think that if someone is receiving both services, then it is crucial for the agencies to work together to determine what it is that's needed, what negotiations might be happening on the HSS side that then need to be taken into account with the rental assistance side. So I absolutely do think that there will be coordination that's crucial between those agencies. I think the way that that will happen is that anyone who is referred for HSS services, whether they are or are not receiving rental assistance, will be on the HSS wait list and referrals sheet. And so you will be able to see on that list whether they are receiving rental assistance as well, or let me put it this way, in the quote unquote running for receiving rental assistance, because some might not have received it yet, but are working with a rental assistance agency, and those that are working with a housing stability services agency. So they will be able to see who they are assigned to on either side. HSS agencies can also refer folks to rental assistance agencies, or for the pre-application when that opens once a month. They will be encouraged to send over any and all folks who are seeking that assistance, and then that will populate that list. But there will absolutely be the ability and encouragement for those agencies to work together to best meet the needs of whatever household they're serving. Is the CERA program the same as the ERA program? It is not. So the difference is that the ERA program was funded through federal dollars, and those federal dollars are finishing out this year. The CERA program is funded through Proposition 123, which is exclusively state funds. And so those state funds will re-up once a year. This is meant to be a long-term program. So as of right now, there's not an end to those funds. However, they do fluctuate as they are coming from Tabor funds. So depending on what there is at the end of every year, we will receive a certain portion of that funding for this program. So it is not the same program. However, for folks seeking that assistance, it will look like the same program. It's just a state rental, like a state-run rental assistance program. They will access it in the same way that they've been accessing the ERA program. So outwardly, it should not look different. But behind the scenes, for the agencies and for us as the state, it is a different program because the funding source is completely different. What other questions do you have?
I just want to flag, I mean, obviously feel free to still ask questions, but just want to flag for everyone that we put a link in the chat to the HSS RFA webpage, and that's where we'll post the recording of this meeting.
Thank you, Haley. Okay, well, if any other questions come up, if you're anything like me, the moment you hit end call, you will come up with 3 different questions that are crucial and time sensitive. Please get a hold of me. Again, this recording will be posted on there. It has my contact information, but it can also be found in the RFA document. My name is Maria Stein, and I'm the Emergency Rental Assistance Program Manager. So please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any and all questions, any nuanced situations, et cetera, et cetera.
Maria,
So-
we got another question.
Oh, wonderful. Yes.
How do you visualize the relationship between CERA and eviction defense legal services?
So how do I envision it? The way that we have seen it work most often is that eviction defense legal services, for the most part, by the time you're in that boat, you probably need rental assistance, and you would most likely qualify if you haven't received assistance recently, which is the main reason why folks would not qualify. So we see a lot of interaction between the agencies that do case review and administration currently for ERA and the ones that will do case review and administration for the CERA program. There will be a very clear relationship with those folks. That being said, between the Housing Stability Services agencies, there should absolutely be a link between those, because some of those folks might not qualify for rental assistance, but still need different services that might be able to be met by the Housing Stability Services agencies. So I think that once we select the agencies that will be provided with these funds and will be distributing these funds to Coloradans, then we will be able to work with those agencies to determine, how do you foresee that HSS services and legal services could work together? What do you foresee are going to be the main ways in which those two would interact outside of just rental assistance referrals? So I think that will be a crucial conversation. I would also encourage you, if your agency already has a way in which they're interacting with legal services, to detail that out in the narrative, because I think that, the best ideas will come from you all. You are on the ground. You understand the needs of these households better than any of us here. And so that would be really important for you to detail out in the narrative. Any other questions from folks?
All right, I'm going to jump in and ask mine now since it's quieting down.
Wonderful. Yes.
You had said yesterday there is a 24-month look back in this grant. So if a household has received assistance in the past 24 months, they are not eligible. Does
Or
that
rental
include assistance from a local nonprofit or religious group?
It depends. If the money is state or federal funds, then yes, it does count.
Okay.
However, if it's something like your local church found out that you were having trouble paying your rent and they organized a GoFundMe, that does not count.
All right. But
If your family member was able to provide you with rental assistance, that does not count. So it's anything that's tied to local, state, or federal funds. So for example, TRUA funding counts.
or ESG.
Yep.
But if we had a applicant, for example, come to us and they were in a very time-sensitive crisis, we might be able to assist with our internal funds for that month and say apply for CERA in the next application period or at the call center. And that would
When
not
you say
be a
our
barrier.
internal funds, what do you mean?
Broomfield Fish's internal funds. So nonprofit, not state funds, just nonprofit.
That's a good question. Let me look into that and get back to you.
Okay, I'll send you an email.
Please, because that's a good thought, and I think that that would apply to a lot of agencies, and I definitely want to parse that out so that we maintain, the same answer every time this comes up, because I'm sure it will come up often. That's a really good question. If there are no more questions for the Housing Stability Services, any folks, are only nonprofits allowed to respond to the RFA? Yes, is the short answer to it. So we will not be granting money to like municipal governments, that kind of thing.
I had a question come up. This is Hannah Beltran.
Please.
I have I'm wondering in regards to the budget, when we're breaking it out cost per hour, and then the program module category, can we put in different costs per hour for different services within that scope of work? Or should we just be including like one hourly wage? So I'm thinking like navigation versus application assistance versus, warm handouts? Like what, how, and should we be breaking those costs per hour out? And then similar with the other costs?
So no, because the hourly rate for HSS services is set. It is $31.05 per hour that is billable for HSS. That will not change or fluctuate. So what is billed in within that hour is any of the allowable HSS expenses that or services provided are what then will build up that 3105. So it's not like what's for the budget, you would be including, how many hours of HSS service will you be providing? And then based on that, multiplying that by the hourly rate and getting the total that your agency would be requesting for services provided.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Thank you. What I was going to say is that if there are no more HSS specific questions for any of those who have questions related to case review and administration, I am also happy to, now that we're at the end, to answer any of those questions as well. So if anyone has questions relating to both or to one versus the other, please feel free to speak up. Okay. Well, again, you have my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. We're available for anything. And yeah, we look forward to seeing your applications and answering whatever questions you might have. So thank you all for joining, and please let us know. All
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.